So yeah, so there's only one person today in the class. We're gonna go get started. What I'm trying to do, what I want to do now is since we only have a month left,
Why?
I'm gonna go over the exercise and questions,
Mhm.
and I just want to make sure that you understand what we're doing and before we move forward, because the parts that is left that we need to study is I can teach that in a day. So I want to make sure that you understand what we have done so far. And
Mhm.
this session here, I'm gonna just keep it for questions, and I will try to answer all your questions so we can move forward. Okay, so let's go get started. Any questions?
Right now, I don't have any question because I think we have almost like 3 weeks we didn't have class. So the last time, even though we made of 3 or 4 weeks, I think I missed two class before that
Hmm.
time. So that means I'm behind a little bit for some lessons, but I'm going to catch up whenever you're going to start up, and I'm going to find out where I need to go.
Okay, so since you are the only person here in the class,
Mhm.
I'm gonna just go over what I taught the other people, so you
Mhm.
can kind of see um, and uh, and learn, right?
Why?
So let me share my screen here. So what I taught in the other during those classes that you missed was,
Mhm.
first of all, I taught them how to create a database, because
Mhm.
currently we are using Postgres data engine.
Mhm.
So I taught them how to create the database. And as you can see here, the syntax is clear. First of all, before creating the database, we had to create the role. So the syntax was here, create role, and the role name was DB2 admin, and that role was a super user,
Mhm.
and then that role needs to have the privilege to create database, and it also has a privilege to create a role, and it also has a login, and the login password is this. So in database, when we say role, we mean user. A role is just a user account,
Mhm.
and then the password is this one here. And after creating this role, we also created the database.
So how do you, excuse me, how do you create a role?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see.
So this is the syntax to create a role. You
Okay.
see the syntax that I highlighted?
Why?
Yeah, so that's the syntax to create a role. So the syntax is create role and then the role name, right? Which
Mhm.
is the username. And then those other parameters are the privileges that we are giving to the user. So
Mhm.
this means that the user will have a super user privilege. He will also have the create DB privilege, which means that the user can create other database. And the user also has the privilege to create a role, which means that the user can create other roles like this one here. And the user will have the possibility to log in, right? And we
Mhm.
are passing another parameter for the password and
Mhm.
specify the password for that user. And
Mhm.
in this case here, the password is admin1, right?
Mhm.
So the full syntax here creates a role, which means that it creates a user.
Mhm.
And after that, the next thing that I taught them was to create the database. So the syntax to create a database is create space database,
Mhm.
and then specify the database name. And the database that we created was the DB2 database. So we have two databases. As you can see on my connections here, I have DB1 and DB2. So those are the database that we created. So create database and database name. So the database name here can be anything. It just depends on what kind of name you want to get. You want to name your database, but it can be anything. So when we create a database, we specify another parameter with owner. So with owner means that it specifies the owner of that database. And in this case here, the owner is DB2 admin, which is the role that we just created a few minutes ago, right? So which means that DB2 admin is the user administrator. And after creating the database, then we had to grant all access to that user. So then we had to run the command grant all privileges on database DB2 to DB2 admin. So this is the syntax, grant all privileges on database, and then you have to specify the database name here, which can be anything, depends on your preference. And we are providing those privileges to the DB admin. So this syntax here does not necessarily need to be here because the DB2 database is already owned by the DB2 admin. So the DB2 admin by default has all the privileges that he needs to manage the database. But we at least gonna make sure that he has all of them. That's why we did this one here. And after that, grant connect on database DB2 to DB admin. So here we are granting the connect privilege to the database DB2 for the user DB2 admin. And we don't necessarily need to do this because when we created the role, he has the login. Okay, so we had to do this because the DB2 admin is the owner, but we need to allow him to be able to connect, to log into the database. So these are the syntax that we used in order to create the role, create the database, grant all the privileges, and also grant all the connect privilege to the database for the user. So after that, the next thing that we did is create the tables. So if you remember, I think you were in the EARD diagram class when we explained how the entity relationship diagram work and how the tables are connected to each other. So here now we had to create those tables to implement the entity relationship diagram. So we had to create a table. The first table was the table customers. So the syntax is clear, create table customers. And then the customer ID has the data type of an integer. And this was the primary key. And the customer first name has the data type of variable characters. And the limits characters are 50. And the customer cell phone number data type was integer. So we had to create this table and create this one and create all these tables. So there are two ways you can create the tables. So you can execute the entire file like this, and it will go and create all these tables for you, right? But at the same time, you can also create the same tables one at a time. So like the first table is this, you can execute it, it will create a table and go to the next table and next table. But you don't necessarily need to do that because you can run the whole file and it will create the tables. And then after the tables were created, I had to show them how to insert into the tables. So in order to insert the data into the tables, there's multiple ways you can insert data into the tables. So the syntax to insert a data into a table is the insert into, right? And when you say insert into, then you're gonna have to specify the customers. Specify the table name, which is customers in this case. And then you need to specify the value parameter. And these values here, you need to specify the parentheses, and inside of those, you have to put all the values for each attributes that you have in your table. So for the customers table, if you go back here, we have the first attributes, which is the customer ID, customer first name, last name, phone number, country, state, city, address, zip code, and email. So those are the attributes for this table. And when we go back to here, the order of which you are inserting your values for each attributes need to follow the order of your attributes in a table, which means that when you have this table, the first attribute is customer ID, the second attribute is the customer first name, and the third attribute is the customer last name, right? So you cannot, when you are inserting into your table, you cannot, instead of starting with the customer ID as the first value for the first attributes, you cannot change that by starting with the customer first name, because it's changing the order, and also because the data type is different. If you notice, the customer ID attributes has the data type of an integer, but the first name attributes has a different data type of the variable character. So when you are flipping those things, you will get an error when you're trying to insert into your table. So let's assume that your order is correct, like this one here. So you will have all these values in order. And then at the end of your syntax, you need to make sure that you put in the semicolon, which specifies the end of your syntax. And then you can run one line at a time. So you can select the first line and execute it. And if you execute it, it will insert those values into the table, right? Or you can write multiple lines like this and select them all at the same time and run them together. So those data will get inserted into your table. That's the second way to do that. And the other way to do it is like this one here. So you don't have to create multiple insert into statements. You can use one insert into and specify all the attributes here on the top. So you will do insert into and then a table name and specify all the attributes on the top here. And then you will have the values parameter. And inside of the value, then you can specify all the rows, right, of the values that you're going to insert into your table. And you will do that. You can add as many entries or rows, as many as you want. But you need to make sure that you don't end your row with a semicolon, because SQL will interpret that as the end of your syntax, right? So to separate the values, you have to separate them with a comma and only put the semicolon at the end. And when you do that, then you can select your syntax here and execute it. And if you execute it, it will insert all those values into the table. So that's the third way to insert into a table. And the other thing that I showed them is how to update a table, right? So let's say you have an attribute called customer last name into the table customers, and you want to change the last name of the user, right? So you can say update table, update customers, update customers, and then set customer last name attribute equal to Davis, which means that you are changing the last name of the customer to Davis. So this is good, but the disadvantage that you will have when you do this is that it will update all of the customers' last name. So all your customers' last name will be Davis, which is a huge mistake to make because you're changing all the customers' last name. So instead of do that, you need to specify a where clause. So in this case here, instead of doing updates, customers set customer last name equal Biden to change the Biden last name. If you stop here, that will change all the customers' last name. So in order to be specific, you need to specify the where clause. So you will do where customer ID equal to. So the last name for the customer that is on line 2, that has the ID 2, is the only last name that will be changed. So that's how you can be specific, to only change a specific entry. And you can do the same for any entry like that. And when you do select all from customers here, you will notice that all the users do not have the same last name. They have different last name. So that's how you can update data into the tables.
So the question I have, how did you execute SQL?
To execute, so this is dbeaver. It's a connector. So it uses ODBC and also JDBC, ODBC. So in this case, I'm using ODBC. But if you're connecting to a Java application or a Java data engine, then you can use JDBC, right? So
Okay.
I can play here to execute everything in this file, but I don't want to do that because I have different things here. But in this case here, if you want to execute only one line of this file, then you will select that line only, right click, and hover over the execute, and click on execute SQL statements. When you do that, then you will do that again. When you do that, then you will notice that your database will be queried from customers. Right click, execute SQL statements, and it will query your data from the database. So the other thing that I showed them is how to rename the table. So let's say the table name is country, and you want to rename that to countries, right? And the syntax is the alter syntax. So you can do alter table and specify the table name and then rename to countries. And if you do select from countries, you will find the country. If you do select from a country, you won't find the country table anymore. They will tell you that this table does not exist because you have renamed the name of the table from country to countries. And that's how you do that.
If you select country, everything is going to change to countries, or if you select country, you'll be able to see only country on your table.
If you have your table name as country, you can select from that country to query the data from that table. But if you rename your table from country to countries, right, then you're gonna have to make sure that when you run your select statements, you're gonna have to specify the correct table name, because when you rename the table to countries and you try to run select all from country, it will not work until you change your table name into your statements. And the next thing is I gave them the homework. So for that homework, I did ask them to create a role called dbadmin3 with all the permissions, and also create a database called db3, and create a table called students. And this table should have 4 attributes: student ID, student name, student last name, and student email. And the fourth question was add 5 entries into the student table. And the last question was display all the entries into the students table. So that was the homework 1 that I gave them. I haven't seen any homework returned yet. So,
but I think it's easy to do it because if you have how do you call Postgres on your computer is easy to do it in the way you were just try to explain. But my concern is about, as I was trying last time to download the Postgres, is I don't know if this one was successfully done or not, because I think last time we talked about it regarding how to download, because I have any problem with my Java or Adobe, something like that. So I don't know exactly what I have to do right now if I don't have my Postgres done yet.
everybody in the class have the Postgres installed on their computer. Postgres was the first data engine that I installed for everybody in the class. And
Okay.
I am assuming that you have the Postgres data engine installed on your computer.
Okay. Can I share my screen?
I remember that we had an issue with the Oracle database install on your computer, and
Okay.
that was also fixed. The only thing that I remember that we didn't complete yet was the Linux install.
Okay.
So you have Postgres.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. Go ahead and kick off your dbeaver and create. First of all, you need to have, you can use the default login, connect to your dbeaver after this class, and do the homework here. It's on the Slack. You can see all the questions and do this. And this video is also being recorded, and you can follow up on the video as well. So the homework was supposed, what the student needs to return is they need to send me all the 5 queries for above questions to my direct Slack. So you don't have to send the response to the group Slack. You have to send it directly to me, and I will see that. The other, okay, I showed them also how to pull information from table and how to remove the duplicate data. So to pull the information from table, we usually call it query. To query information from a table, we can use the select statements. So you can do select customer first name, customer last name, customer email from, table name, where, customer ID equal 3. Because if you don't specify the where clause and the attribute where you need to filter, you will get all data, as you can see here on the bottom. But if you specify it like this, then you will have only the entry for the customer that has the ID of 3. So that will return the informations, right? But let's say that you have multiple customers that have the same ID, right? So when you run this query here, it will return multiple customers, multiple results, because not only one customer has the ID 3, you have multiple customers that have that ID, right? So in order for you to filter those results, you need to use something called distinct. So you can run select distinct on the table where customer ID equals Joe. So if you execute this query, it will return the result without duplicate. So the distinct here does that for you, right? And the same thing on here. And I also showed them how to update a table data. So
can you hold on? Can you stay? Can you repeat about how to pull information from the table and how to remove the duplicate? So you said like you select customer name, customer last name, customer email from customers where cost ID
Equal 3. So
equal to a yes.
this one here,
Mhm.
first of all, customer first name, last name, email. Those are the attributes that you have in your table.
Mhm.
And then from, and then you specify your table name, and you use the where clause and specify the attribute that you wanna pull the data for, right?
Okay.
And then this one here will return multiple information if you have multiple customers that have the same ID. So in this case here, if you have multiple customers that have the ID equal to 3, your result will have a lot of duplicate because they are filtering based on the ID, right? So in order to pull the information without any duplicate, then you have to specify the distinct. So instead of saying select first name, last name, whatever, you're gonna do select distinct and then specify your attributes, and then from customers where customer first name equal Joe. Only the specific entries will be returned without duplicate. And I showed them how to update the table in the update the table data, right? So to update something into the table, you need to use the update statement. So you will do updates and specify your table name and set your attribute equal to the new value where the customer first name equal Joe. And that's how you can update the customer phone number. The customer called Joe, update his phone number. And the where clause here is very important because if you don't apply the where clause, you will update everybody's phone number to one phone number. So you need to make sure that you specify the where clause. And that's the same thing here if you want to update the customer first name. And the last thing that I showed them was how to rename the table. I already showed you that up there. And this is just the same thing, alter the table and rename that. And that was all that I showed them. And if you go to the War Room Slack channel, you have all the homeworks, and just do the homework and send it to me directly. Any questions?
So I'm going to do the homework on Postgres. DB1 insert data so or where I have to do where I need to go.
When you open your dbeaver, you can click on this plus here, this one here, and you can open a new connection. So let me close this. You can come here, and then let's say it's Postgres, it's SQL. You can select Postgres here and do next, and put your local host. By default, it's local host. The database will be the same as this one here, Postgres. The username will be the same, but the password will be the password that you created when you installed your Postgres. So you'll put the password here and then click on test connection. And then when the connection is successfully tested, then you click on finish. So that would connect you like this one here, like DB2. And then you can click on this one on top here to open the SQL file where you can run your commands. Any questions again?
No, I'm good now. So from now, we're going to have classes like I was before, or are you going to?
Yeah, we're gonna have class every Thursday and Saturday, and we only have a month left. So when we finish the month of May, that'll be all for the class and no more teaching.
So we're not going to have any project to submit.
I gave you the homework.
Yeah, because I think the easy way to learn is about the project. Because if we do more all the time some project and we submit it and you review and then you amend and then you say like you have to improve this part you didn't do right. I don't know. I understand because even though you don't have enough time, but if you can just give us some project and we can be familiar with what we're going to do in the workplace. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
I understand your question and your concern. I gave you the homework. You do the homework and return the results. And at the end, I will give you a project.
Okay.
And
I
then
got you.
every single person will return the project, and I will look at the project and tell you whether the project was good or not, and help you improve where you failed.
Okay, I got you. Thank you very much.
No problem. So that's the end of today's class, and thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for your time.
No problem. Bye.
Bye.